think you only learn some of those things by just giving yourself like a starting point. And then, of course, being close with the community, understanding what are they trying to accomplish. And when you've earned the right to kind of, have even more use cases, and that's a chance to kind of, obviously add functionality to your product and the user experience.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work, episode 361. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. Our community is growing by the day thanks to you, our loyal listeners. I get asked all the time how you can engage with other members of the community. You do it by subscribing to our newsletter. It comes out once a week, and it includes often some fun facts that don't make it into the full episode, and even some clips from our conversations that don't get published. We will share a link to subscribe to that newsletter in the show notes. We are all in this together. I don't mean this podcast. I mean this global experiment called AI and the Future of Work. If you enjoy today's episode, or any other for that matter, share it with just one friend. That's all we ask. They'll know that you care about using AI in a responsible way to make humans better. And you know what? If you know someone who shared this with you, tell them thanks and pay it forward. If you leave a comment, I may share in an upcoming episode like this one from Gordon in Sebastopol, California, right up the road from me, who's an ag tech entrepreneur. Gordon's favorite episode is number 322 with George Savolka. Love that conversation. The Wonderkin, CEO of Hebbia, about how AI is revolutionizing finance and financial decision-making. We learn from AI thought leaders weekly on the show. Of course, the added bonus, you get one AI fun fact. Here it is for today. Brian Kennedy and others from the Pew Research Center published a new report about how Americans view AI and its impact on people and society. Here are 5 insights from the data. Americans are much more concerned than excited about the increased use of AI in daily life, with the majority saying they want more control over how it's used in their lives. Far larger shares say AI will erode more than improve people's ability to think creatively. At the same time, a majority are open to letting AI assist them with day-to-day tasks and activities. Most Americans, polled by the Pew Research Center, don't support AI playing a role in personal matters such as religion or matchmaking. Americans, on the whole, feel strongly that it's important to be able to tell if pictures, videos, or text were made by AI or by humans, yet many don't trust their own ability to spot AI-generated content, very germane to today's conversation. And of course, we'll share a link to the full article in the show notes. My commentary on this one, we in the tech community get too comfortable navel-gazing. For example, 32% of Americans age 65 or older say they've never heard of or have had any contact with AI. Might seem startling to our listeners, but in fact, those are the numbers. AI, of course, is ubiquitous as it infiltrates our daily lives and is used to make important decisions on our behalf, like who gets hired and fired, who's approved for medical treatment, and who gets convicted and released. We clearly must do a better job exercising the 3 core principles of responsible AI. This Pew research really confirms this one. Those 3 principles: when and how AI is used must be transparent. When it's used, results must be consistent and reliable. And when outputs don't map to the corresponding inputs, AI must be configurable. Those are the 3 tenets. As a nation, we're cynical about AI, perhaps for good reason. For any of the amazing technology we're building to be used and trusted, most importantly, we have to make a proactive effort to do better. And nothing short of full explainability and accountability will earn trust in what is becoming, sadly, the post-truth era. Of course, we'll keep unpacking these important topics on this show. Now, shifting to a conversation I've been excited to have. Grant Lee started Gamma with his co-founders in 2020 to build the anti-PowerPoint. Gosh, we all needed that. The product launched in 2022. The company recently announced $50 million in ARR, along with 50 million end users, thus adding it to a short list of the fastest growing tech startups in history. Perhaps the most remarkable Gamma stats are that it has achieved this meteoric growth on $12 million of venture capital and about 30 people. Prior to Gamma, Grant developed a passion for A/B testing while heading up finance at great company Optimizely. He was an investment banker prior to that, after receiving his BS in biomechanical engineering and his MS in mechanical engineering from Stanford. Go Cardinal. And without further ado, Grant, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Let's get started by having you share a bit more about that background and how you get into the space.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Great to be here. Really appreciate it. So this sort of problem space has been one that I've been thinking about for a long time. I guess started my career, as you mentioned, in investment banking and consulting. Living in slide decks. Slide decks are, the sort of medium where ideas get shared, information is spread internally within an organization, and certainly externally with customers, clients, et cetera. And so, for me, it's a medium I've been really familiar with. Kind of more recently, I was working at another startup. That startup got acquired, and I actually went back into more of a consulting and advisory role. So, working with a lot of early stage startups, and was dusting off Google Slides as the sort of tool to use to communicate with my clients. And I recall just one late night, trying to prepare for the next day's meeting and spending all this time trying to format, figure out the right layout, trying to communicate my ideas rather than on the content itself, and just really feeling like that was a frustrating experience. Like, how can I not, visually communicate my ideas effectively? And why am I spending so much time formatting? And so I had this idea of like, what if there's a better way? So I ended up reaching out to two of my former colleagues. They were still actually at Optimizely at that time. And we spent the first 4 or 5 months actually just prototyping, what would some of these concepts look like if we could reimagine slides and presentations broadly from the ground up? What would the sort of core primitives be? And what are some of the sort of value props we could deliver in a space that, slides have been around for almost 40 years? And so, could we actually be different enough to be special in this space? And so we allowed ourselves kind of that 5 month period to really go deep, to kind of build conviction for ourselves. And we ended up taking that initial prototype and turned it into our pitch deck. We actually used, instead of traditional slide deck, we used our prototype to pitch. We raised a little bit of money at the end of 2020, and that really was the beginning of the journey.
It's an incredible journey. So you're talking to so many entrepreneurs right now who are out there scratching their own itch. You hated PowerPoint. We all hate PowerPoint, by the way. But few entrepreneurs, and certainly essentially nobody else that also hates PowerPoint, has been able to turn that into such tight product market fit. And you mentioned like the, kind of some of the constituents, the primitives that you built into the system. This didn't happen on accident. Talk us through kind of how you found product market fit. Like, what was your development process?
Yeah, I think sometimes entrepreneurs or founders might enter a space, and the space itself maybe seems interesting enough, but oftentimes, they get stuck in thinking about how to get started, and then maybe almost limit themselves to like what the true ambition should be. And so, previous startups, I'd say in the slide space specifically, they try to build incrementally better slideware. So like, choose slide, think about slides and like, what is one dimension we can try to be slightly better in? Maybe it's, more delightful collaboration, or maybe it's better templates. But oftentimes that ends up becoming too limited. And then when you think about the broader market, like how are you actually going to compete against PowerPoint that's had nearly 40 years of adding every bell and whistle to their product? And even if it is harder to use, it is very, very functional. And so when we entered this category, we thought about kind of a few different things. One is, could we somehow anticipate where the future, where things were headed in the future? If we think about slides as a 16:9 fixed format, it's not great for many different things, where when we think about if people need to communicate and share their ideas across many different devices, what if you had building blocks that were mobile friendly or mobile responsive by default, so that anybody could create content, it could instantly be used across devices? What if you had content that wasn't just text and images like most slides are, but multimedia rich? What if you could actually embed other websites or other web apps directly into what you're trying to present as a way to kind of showcase or like storytell? And we felt like that was going to be important. And of course, along that, it was like, what if you could also have content that was interactive by nature, so that rather than me just pointing at a screen, I can click on things, I can actually zoom in, I can really kind of guide the experience in a much more, clear and sort of a way that feels much richer. And so all those things were factors that we wanted to make sure that we could account for. And then we also wanted to kind of solve for universal pain points, things that we felt like there was just an underserved part of the market. So PowerPoint, of course, ubiquitous in the sense that everybody's used it, but many people struggle with things like visual design, finding the right layout, structuring something in a way that could be consumed by other people much easier. And, we recognize that the vast majority of us are visual learners. And so if we're visual learners, but not visual designers, then there's obviously a mismatch there in terms of like what the output needs to be and what sort of input we could provide. And so we tried to take a very different approach to say, okay, if we want to enter this category, we need to make it dead simple for the average person to go in there, instantly be able to have kind of free-flowing ideas come onto this canvas. And then from there, we're going to help you design and really craft something that is, hopefully special and magical. And so when I look kind of like at the category and really kind of broadly tools in this space previously, I'd see tools that basically approached it as this is a design-first tool. Like you give you a blank canvas and it's on the user to figure out all the layouts, resizing the boxes, all the layers. And we're going to approach it rather than be design first, we're going to be design last. We're going to allow you to actually be writing first. You're going to go in, you're going to write the content, let it be much more free flowing.
So Grant, I got to imagine that you took a lot of the learning from Optimizely into Gamma. For those unfamiliar with the great product that is Optimizely, it helps you experiment and design better apps, websites, products, etc. Talk us through. I mean, you just gave a great example of how you thought about the primitives, like you said in Gamma. What did you learn from Optimizely?
There's so much. I mean, I feel like on the company side, you can't just discount the fact that building with a great team just obviously provides so much leverage. And a lot of our early team did come from Optimizely. And so we kind of assembled a crew that already had a foundation of trust and that allowed us to build really fast. I do think just being in the category of experimentation made it so that when we started building Gamma, experimentation was very much top of mind. And so we've architected our entire infrastructure to allow us to experiment very, very fast. And, our DNA with experimenting has just been from the very, very beginning of us as a company. I guess the fun story is like at the very outset, after we raised that little bit of money, we actually ran, I guess you can't really call it an A/B test, but we actually parallel ran kind of two different ideas at the same time. One idea was, trying to reimagine presentations from the ground up. And the other idea was actually trying to create a virtual office because this was peak pandemic. And part of the bet was that, a lot of hybrid teams and teams that need to work virtually, they obviously don't have a space like an office where people can collaborate much more seamlessly. And so we fundamentally really want to, our ambition was to help improve the way people communicate, presentations as one category, as one way to do that. And the other way is, building this sort of virtual office. And so we actually spent the first 6 months after our initial pre-seed round to actually build both simultaneously. We were actually dog fooding both at the same time. And so we would actually have presentations in our virtual office and be able to actually see how those two would even coexist. And after that 6-month period, it gave us our chance to kind of actually building conviction even more so for the presentation use case because we could see like the million different things we could do to make that experience even better and like deliver even more value. And with the virtual office, we actually had this idea, this realization that we're ultimately competing against the sort of in real life experience. And that was always going to be hard to actually replicate or actually exceed. And so no matter how much we built, like that was always going to be just a limiting factor. Like it will just never be as good as the in real life office experience. And it could be good in potentially other ways, but that was kind of the ceiling there. And so for us, like we just weren't as excited about, spending a lot of time in that space when we felt like we were competing against something that was ultimately unachievable. So we ended up shifting gears completely. 100% of the company then focused on actually just building the presentation product.
Based on the fact that there's no Gamma for the virtual office, you made the right decision.
Yeah, hopefully so.
So we're talking mostly about product so far, but the other part of PMF is market. And I got to ask you, how in the world did you and the co-founders have the audacity to think that you could disrupt PowerPoint and Keynote and Google Slides, let alone even kind of the more modern entrants, a Figma, a Canva, things like that? I mean, it's just a Cambrian explosion of apps solving a similar problem. And you found what may very well be, a $1 billion $1 billion in adjacent market. Talk to us about how you got conviction around thinking that a small team at Gamma could defeat the incumbents.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with finding a space where, it really feels like it could be your life's work, right? Like everything you have done in the past has prepared you for this moment or this space. And of course, when you're first starting off building something, you might have some grand vision of maybe where things could go, but then you also have to be practical. You kind of build conviction day by day. You create something that you can get in the hands of early users and see if, can you actually address some of the biggest, maybe obstacles or things that will be really challenges down the road, and try to get the hands of users to actually start testing some of your hypotheses. And so that's always been the sort of healthy tension we've had. Like we have this ambition of ultimately trying to change or improve how people communicate, because we think that's a huge idea in itself. And that's the opportunity really resonates with us, because when we think about human communication, there's really no other single point of leverage you can do to really accelerate people's opportunity in front of them. If they want to reach more people, they want to build more businesses, if they want to have an impact in the world, if you can improve the way they communicate, that unlocks so much more for them. And so that for us has like been the overarching kind of the long-term North Star, is like we have an ambition there to move the needle. Let's do something big. Let's go after a category that has not been disrupted in 40 years, that is ubiquitous, that is used by billions of people. And let's really try to take a swing at this. And then, of course, then it's like brick by brick. Like, let's actually try to build something that people are using in the beginning as something that maybe serves a few different use cases, and then over time, many, many more.
It's what great entrepreneurs do. You faced Goliath and you said, why not me? Why not us? Right?
Totally. Yeah. And I think, you have to obviously start by believing that you are the right team to go after this. Oftentimes the why us, why now, it does need to feel, authentic. You need to have a conviction. And sometimes I do see teams kind of chasing just the next shiny object, because, of course, AI is just this amazing gift. There's amazing technology that can be applied to many different things. And sometimes, you might try to just apply it to many different problems. And then if you happen to see a little bit of traction, you might start building something in a space that maybe you actually don't care that much about, and maybe it's easy to get the first amount of first year of traction. But then, is this going to be a multi-year journey that you can go on? Is this a space you care deeply about? Is this a space that could potentially be your life's work? I think those are questions you should try to front load, try to ask early on in the journey, so that you don't spend too much time in a category that maybe you don't actually care that much about.
So something that I've noted is that so far in this conversation, in a brilliant way, you've talked about product design, your philosophy, the market. You haven't talked about AI, and it is the highest compliment that I could pay an entrepreneur. There's been a lot of call it disillusionment or maybe malaise with a lot of these kind of AI first new entrants trying to take a similar approach to Gamma, and just in the creativity, the editing space, the design space, just always feels like the AI part is your adversary, not your advocate. You're always wrestling with what you thought it could do and it doesn't. And I thought I could be able to edit it, and oh, F it, I'm just going to go back to the old way, Not so with Gamma. So I'm going to guess that, that the way you've designed AI into the product, very intentional. And just want to get your perspective on how you think about where and how AI enters the process, this relationship that you're building with your users.
Yeah, we really much want AI to be, your partner. And the way we think about our sort of AI is as if you had an expert design partner, sitting right next to you. And, that partner could help review all of your content, provide suggestions, guide you along the way, could make some of those changes for you so that you're kind of saving yourself from all the mundane and tedious tasks of creating that content in itself. And it very much is human in the loop. We're not trying to replace the human. The human still needs to come with the ideas, still needs to help shape it, still needs to know what the desired outcome really should be. And without that, then obviously, the tool is just a tool. It will not be able to actually achieve the right outcome. when I think broadly, also, I think we're at this sort of the earliest stages of where AI is actually becoming, more and more useful. It's almost like, those we're given like AI is this amazing superpower, and it's like those, in those movies where someone, becomes a superhero. They get these superpowers, and in the very first half of the movie, they're super awkward with the superpower, right? And oftentimes they even forget they even have the superpower. And then at some point, the second half of the movie, things start clicking and it actually starts like being applied in a way that you can do amazing things. And I think broadly, when I look across just all tooling, all AI, technology, I still feel like we're in the awkward phase. A lot of people are still trying to figure it out, oftentimes actually forgetting they even have the superpower at their disposal. And so AI needs to be there to be a really sort of seamless, partner, really guide you along the way, make it feel not intimidating, and really still continue to lean on the human to really help drive the right outcome.
One of the things I think few appreciate who haven't done, incorporated AI into the product design process is just how unpredictable it can be, and how the models obviously change frequently, and they're available until they're not, and the outputs are different depending on very subtle changes, and you don't control that. And this is very different from developing technology in the past. When we started developing the cloud, nobody said, I can't rely on this app because when I run, the electrons in AWS are just fundamentally different from the electrons I get in Azure, right? And yet with AI, like it's a fickle dependency to have. When I use Gamma, I never feel like it's fickle or untrustworthy or unreliable. What are some of the intentional decisions you've made to kind of mitigate the risk of AI being unpredictable?
Yeah, I mean, it comes with even just how you maybe invest in building the team. So one of the things we did early on is really invest heavily in our product design team. At one point of the, in time, I think 25% of the company was product designers, which for early stage startups, that's not the very typical kind of investment. I think we very clearly over-indexed on that. And we were trying to be intentional about that because you're creating so many different new surface areas and new, user experiences that you need to be very thoughtful about, when things don't work as expected, what is the failover, for instance? Or, when you are generating content, how can you make that really truly a feature and not, to your point, like feel like a bug or like a very inconsistent experience? And so, it's powerful to have AI that can be very generative and it gives you different variations. And that's awesome. How do you harness a lot of that where it doesn't feel unpredictable, but it feels like you're actually given, much more variety? And actually that visual variety is key to any sort of creative work. And so we've really tried to lean into product designers can go super deep on understanding the user expectations, the user, problems that we're trying to solve, and ensure that our solution actually delivers and fulfills on that, those problems and the promise of actually, solving those problems for them.
The nature of building trust with users when you use AI, like what you just described, is built based on an expectation, kind of a social contract that the user has with what AI will and won't do. And oftentimes it's sensitive to the words they use and various things that you and I do, but it's hard to build into a product. How do you think about, or how do you design into the experience, the fact that the AI may generate things the user didn't expect that may be offensive? They may, disagree with the Black George Washington, or, some of the things that gave some of the early models, specifically the image editors,
Right.
Really a bad reputation. I imagine something like that, you've got to do some thinking about, how to anticipate that. What's your philosophy there?
Yeah, I mean, something we've invested a lot in is just this realm of like, trust and safety broadly, right? Like, how can you ensure that the output of the model takes into consideration all those things you mentioned? It also means partnering with, the right model providers that also take trust and safety super seriously, and having very open dialogue back and forth around things that they're seeing, things that we're seeing, where might things be going off the rails, and making sure that that never becomes something that the user is seeing on a regular basis. Building trust with the users also comes with like making sure that you are investing in that early on. When we first started seeing users, repeat usage of our product, we pulled our power users into a Slack workspace. We called it the Gambassador program, which is, anybody that's actively using Gamma, we're going to pull them there. We're going to make sure they have access to every one of us, including myself. I would be daily checking and, chatting with all these users to make sure, as we're shipping new things, the user experience is still to the level that we expect it to be. If they're noticing anything that seems off, we get flagged immediately, and we will be the first to try to respond, make sure that we acknowledge the full extent of what the problem may be. And you kind of have to keep that relationship going for as long as you possibly can. I think we try to now do that in many different ways, obviously even through social channels and email, try to keep essentially DMs open, right? You want people to be able to access you. You want to continue to build and invest in that relationship on an ongoing basis, no matter how big you get. And I hope that's something we can continue to do. And I think that gives you the chance to ensure that if anything ever is unexpected, your team is able to be there to quickly respond.
One of the huge unfair advantages that you and the team Gamma have is that you've amassed a massive user base in a short amount of time. And I know you, just from this conversation, you think in a very data-driven way. What's an insight that you've learned from looking at user click streams, user patterns and usage that you didn't expect to see?
Yeah, when we first launched our AI product, a couple of years ago, it was still very, very rudimentary. It's pretty basic. You had this prompt box, and in there you can enter create a presentation on X, Y, or Z, presentation on marketing strategies for retail, and you get some outline, and then it generate the deck for you. And what that's great for certain, oftentimes toy use cases. You just want to understand can Gamma do, what can Gamma do? It will give you some of that magic out of the box, and then of course from there you can continue using Gamma. But then what we ended up seeing is it's this little tiny prompt box, but people were pasting walls of text in there. They were pasting entire, copy and paste directly from an entire, Word doc all in there, and they wanted to use that to generate a presentation. And so what we recognized actually digging into that was that obviously people have a lot of existing work that they need help synthesizing, visualizing, crafting the right story. And how can we help them? It's not just a simple prompt box, but it's hey, maybe I actually created an entire outline in ChatGPT and I want to paste that wall of text into Gamma and I want to visualize it. Or actually I have a 20-page PDF I want to really parse down and create a 5-slide deck that really hones in on the right points. How do I do that? And so we've really, broadened kind of the aperture there to allow people to have many different sort of on-ramps into using Gamma, so that they, if you do have existing work or work from other, tools, we make that as seamless as possible. And I think you only learn some of those things by just giving yourself a starting point, and then of course being close with the community, understanding what are they trying to accomplish. And when you've earned the right to kind of, have even more use cases, and that's a chance to kind of, obviously add functionality to your product and the user experience.
Grant, every startup that succeeds has at least one near-death tale, usually multiple. And if you say you only have one, it's probably because you're lying. Would just love to know, for as much as, it's just been a meteoric rise, and probably from the outside, all anyone sees is success of Gamma. Talk us through, maybe one of those scenarios where you said, I don't know about this one. This seems a little doubtful.
Yeah, I mean, there were multiple. I would say even just the inception of the company wasn't a guarantee. I was living in London at the time. This was after the last company I was at was acquired. I was doing consulting for startups and peak pandemic. And so, I was trying to pitch investors in the US. And so, in a very sort of modest flat, I had to be crammed into basically between our kitchenette and our laundry room. There's a little small space that I could set up. And because of the time difference, I'd be pitching from, 8 p.m. through midnight or, early into the early morning. And I have 2 little ones, so trying to make sure I don't wake up the kids as well. And I remember probably my 3rd or 4th pitch, getting on a call with an investor and literally being laughed off the call. First of all, he didn't even join the Zoom. He just dialed in from his phone, from his car. And the entire time I'm pitching, at the very end, he just told me that it was probably one of the worst ideas he's ever heard, and that there's no way we'll ever be able to compete with the incumbents. They have ultimate distribution, and so why would he ever invest in me? And then the call kind of just cut off. I never even got a chance to have a rebuttal. It just ended, and I just remember sitting there midnight, crammed next to the kitchenette thinking, yeah, maybe he's right. Like, what are we doing? Like, are we going to invest so many years of our life chasing an idea that's just, in his words, dumb? But then I think there was truth to his point, which is like, yeah, if you're going to go in this category, you do need to think about distribution from the very beginning. If you're going to give yourself a chance, you got to think about like building a product that's so great that you have strong word of mouth, that there's organic virality. And so despite, those words, feeling very painful, I do think it helped us think about from the outset, like, hey, this is going to be a very hard category to enter. And if we're going to do it, we got to be thinking about a lot of different dimensions from the very beginning. You obviously still have to build a product people love, but then there's so much more beyond that to build a great business. And so I appreciate the sort of tough talk there, because I do think in some ways it helped shaped us. A few years in, actually 2 weeks before the biggest, I mentioned our AI launch, our big AI launch in 2023 is when the Silicon Valley Bank collapse happened, and nearly all of our money was in the bank, in that bank. And so there was a moment of time where we just had no idea if we were even going to be able to make payroll. We had been prepping for this launch for nearly 4 months, and so heads down, really preparing kind of for this moment to go all in on like, hey, we're going to show Gamma, go show the world what Gamma is made of, and then having this moment of like, is what's going to happen with the company. And so I think that gave us a chance to kind of show a bunch of resilience and also lean into one of our core values around transparency. I called everybody into a room. At the time, we were building in a 2-bedroom apartment, and so it was very literally one of the two bedrooms. Everybody into the room, and just saying, "Hey, I know this situation is happening. You have my word that I will do everything I possibly can to make sure everyone gets paid on time. We're not going to miss payroll, and we are not going to push our launch. We are still going to stick with our launch date." And so fortunately, the bank situation itself resolved itself, but we just stayed so like laser focused, and as a team, we like rallied through that moment. And it just felt magical actually launching, and then things like kind of just taking off from there. And I think when you think about the early team having gone through a moment of near like existential like crisis, that sort of like scrappiness, that mentality of like we can survive anything, I think has served us well and continues to serve us well today.
It chills down my spine here, and you describe the call or the doubters, or they really are the kind of calls that you just replay in your head for years, aren't they?
Totally.
Yeah, you can't unhear them in a positive way, in a transformative way. So, Grant, I got to get you off the hot seat, but you're not going anywhere without answering one last important question for me. So, roll back the clock. If the Grant that I'm talking to right now is talking to, let's say, the kid operating, I don't know, a lathe, some machinery in a lab, and probably on Galvez Street or something on campus. I believe that's where the ME labs were. Not Terman. I think Terman might have been gone by the time.
No, Terman was there.
It was there. Okay. All my classes were in Terman. It's weird. It's now a pit in the ground. But anyway, so you're having a conversation with that kid, the ME undergrad. Who has inspired you? Who are your role models? At what point did you feel like that Grant could become the Grant today running Gamma, a domain that you didn't train to be part of, but like, what's your backstory, and what do you look back at as being kind of something that unlocked the key to your success?
Yeah, I mean, I think back to that time, and the honest answer is I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my career. I did mechanical engineering. One late night in a lab, I just realized, this wasn't going to be kind of my long-term path. Like I couldn't see myself doing it. And so, I think a lot of my advice for folks early in their journey and their career is like, you do whatever you can to try to increase your luck surface area. And I think luck really has, that surface area kind of has two different dimensions. One is time. And so if you can find something where over a long time horizon, you can compound in learning and value, I think that will serve you well. And the other is like finding other people to surround yourself with that also bring luck to you, where they are super knowledgeable, they're super ambitious, they're hungry, they force you to get out of your own comfort zone. And for me, that's always been, can I find people that give me that sort of energy, that really inspire me in those ways? And they come from all different facets of life. They could be your family, they could be your friends. I remember when I was still at Stanford, we worked on this one project where I got to have David Kelly as my mentor, and he was, IDEO, like just like a great design mind. And for us to be able to be exposed to the way someone like that thinks, that just also just shapes the way you might approach different problems, entering a category, entering a space, and knowing that there oftentimes won't just be a single answer or a single path. There's actually many different ways to solve all of these different problems. And so how can you provide your own unique lens to all of that? How can you surround yourself with people that are energized by the same problems that you are? And then just give yourself a chance to go after it. I think once you have that, you have the conviction, there's just so much opportunity. And I'm personally super excited for, the next wave of founders, because I feel like, there's no better time to be building. So much energy right now. I'm cheering everybody on as a founder that knows how hard it can be. Like I'm there. I want to be there to help, be a mentor, be someone that could be useful. And so I'm just super excited. I think there's going to be a lot of great things that come out of this.
Great answer. Well, I know you've had so much success, but there's so much ahead of you. I hope you'll take me up on the offer. Come back and share with us new milestones in your journey.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate it. Great to be here.
And where can the audience learn more about you and the great work your team's doing?
Yeah, I'm trying to be active on both LinkedIn and Twitter X. So if anybody's on socials, hit me up. Would love to connect. Otherwise, check out gamma.app. Would love for you guys to give us some feedback. We're always trying to incorporate that as well.
Excellent. Well, all the best. Wishing you continued success. That is Grant Lee, CEO and founder of Gamma. And that's all the time we have for this week on AI and the future of work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin from PeopleRain. And of course, we're back next week with another fascinating guest.